Good evening, dear students. This is the last session for Indian Economic Development, the part or section B of Economics Class 12. Today, we are going to discuss about the development experiences of India, a comparison with the neighbor countries, which are India, China, and Pakistan. That means in this chapter, we'll be discussing about the development experiences in the parts of India, Pakistan, and China. So let's start. As it's a very comprehensive chapter, it's a very lengthy chapter along with a good weightage of marks. So each and every portion of this chapter is important. Moreover, this comprises of more of the 6 mark and 4 mark questions in your question paper. As I just mentioned that there is a good weightage for this chapter. So it's easy to complete and cover the syllabus of this chapter and all the various topics of this chapter as per the topics which I'm going to discuss in the today's session. So the first question comes to this topic or this chapter, that why do we discuss only the 3 economies, which are India, Pakistan, and China? For India, it goes without saying because we are here trying to talk about the home economy. But when it comes to China and Pakistan, what are the reasons that we have selected only these 2 countries for the comparison? So the first very reason is the geographical reason. We know this very well that we are the parts of Asian continent, and we also share the political boundaries. Moreover, right from weather to season and the geographical areas, that means the relief features like plateaus, mountains, desert, region, everything comes to be or tends to be common in these 3 countries. The second is cultural reasons. To a large extent, as I just mentioned, that certain regions of India, China, and Pakistan share the political boundaries with each other. So, in these common regions, we can find that there are a lot of cultural similarities, including and comprising of food habits, clothes, languages, and many more things. Then comes his economic front. This is very important to understand that when it comes to economic front of these 3 countries, and when we go back to the past of these economies, we find that the scenarios of the economic front were very much common in all these 3 economies. China, India, and Pakistan, they were all suffering from the similar problems, may it be social or economic, and they were all aspiring to become one of the developed economies in the world. When it comes to the next common thing, more, it is mostly a common period of time when they all got independence. Here, I would like to mention one thing for your knowledge, that China was never a colonial country. I repeat, children, China was never a colonial country. It was only India and Pakistan who had got independence from the colonial rule. After partition of India, there was emergence of Pakistan in the same year, that is 1947. That means Pakistan and India, they both became a democratic economy in the year 1947. Whereas when it comes to China, China was never a colonial economy, but yes, there was monarch. With some reforms in China, which we don't need to discuss here, China became a simple communist republic democratic economy in the year 1949. So you can find that almost the time for the independence for all the 3 countries were same. And moreover, all the 3 of us started for the process of development around the year 1950 after settling down with our political and social situations. Then comes this climatic condition. I must mention here that all the 3 economies were basically agricultural economies. As we were the agricultural economies, the climatic conditions matter a lot. We definitely must note it that all the 3 countries depend on monsoon for agricultural productivity. And the monsoon rain is shared by all these 3 countries in the same season and in the same months. Moreover, the agricultural productivities in these three economies are also very much similar, and the crop timings are also very much similar. That means when we have winters, these countries do have the season of winter, the same with summer, and the same is with rainy season, as we all lie in the eastern hemisphere. I repeat, we all lie in the eastern hemisphere of the globe or the earth. I hope these reasons are sufficient to explain you that why we have chosen or selected only these three economies to compare. Why not Korea, Myanmar, or Sri Lanka were one of the list. Then, other than the reasons, excuse me, I would also like to talk about some of the common points or similarities in these three economies. As I just told you in detail that when and how we got independence, I would not further repeat, but if yes, this is a question, you need to write this point as well in this question. Second is the 5-year plan. I'll discuss this in the next slide. Dominance to public sector, the same point will be discussed in the next slide. Types of the economy and economic and social conditions. I just mentioned this in the last topic that economic and social conditions of all these three countries were almost same. Economic condition, that means all the three of us were suffering from poverty. We were all struggling with the growth in GDP, productivity, self-sufficiency, and were all agrarian economies. Whereas when it comes to social condition, we all had been converted into the part of democracy from the part of subject. Like earlier, we were being ruled by the kings. Of course, India and Pakistan were not being directly ruled by kings because we had got independence from colony rule or colonial rule, but the Chinese had definitely come up from a monarch, and India as well. Before the colonial rule was a monarch only. So the social conditions like caste system, backwardness, lack of education, disturbance related to class disparity, social disparity, language and cultural disparities were all there, which resulted into a lot of social and political disturbance in these two economies. Proceeding to the explanation of all these points, as I just told you, that we'll discuss about the independence of these three countries. Please note it down. Why have I explained this very much in this slide as well, so that you can take a note, as it can be a possible one marker. You're very much aware that India got independence in the year 1947, and the same is with Pakistan, whereas China, I just mentioned, that became a Republic of China in the year 1949. Here I would like to add on one thing, children, that we became pure democratic country with a socialist concept of constitution, whereas China was the country which adopted communism as its constitutional base. Now then comes is the 5-year plan. We just read the header 5-year plan. Here I would like to remind, right from China to India were all influenced highly by the Russian economy. Russian economy was a socialist economy, agriculturist economy, as well as a developed economy of that time. It was strong enough to influence any developing countries of that time. Seeing the development of Russia, India decided to opt for the Comprehensive Planning Commission, or the method of making comprehensive 5-year plans. Therefore, they adopted the 5-year plan scheme in the year 1951, which we have already discussed in the chapter 2 of Indian development path from year 1951 to 1990. Then when it comes to Pakistan, Pakistan announced its 5-year plan in the year 1956. But please have a note of it that the name of India's 5-year plan remained 5-year plan, whereas the name of Pakistan's 5-year plan was no more 5-year plan. It was known as Midterm Development Plan. I repeat, Midterm Development Plan. Whereas China opted for these 5-year plans in the year 1953. One more thing to know about that India had total 12 5-year plans. I repeat, India had total 12 5-year plans, which of course ended up with the beginning in the year 2014. Whereas if you talk about, and it was replaced with Niti Aayog, whereas if you talk about Pakistan and China, they still continue with their 5-year plans. I repeat, India started in the year 1951. It continued only till 12 5-year plans. It replaced it with Niti Aayog, whereas Pakistan and China still continue with their 5-year plans. Then comes the third explanation about the adoption of the economy. All the three economies, as I just talked to you about, were suffering from various social and political issues. So it was very important for the countries or the political leaders to take care of the population and to take care of the society. So to be concerned about the poor strata of the society and the various challenges may be on the front of economy or politics or social, they all three decided that the public sector will be taking the charge of all the kind of schemes and major expenses to enhance social development and also to take care of social welfare in the economy. Therefore, all the three economies gave dominance to the public sector. This is very, very important to remember that all these three economies gave dominance to the public sector. Now, other than this, when it came to decide that what kind of economy we should be, I had already mentioned this in the chapter 2, that when India decided to be a mixed economy, there were certain reasons. In the same way, Pakistan adopted mixed economy system. I repeat, children, Pakistan also opted to be a mixed economy system, whereas China was a little different. It did not go with the mixed economy system. It, on the other way, went with the socialist economy. The socialist economy, although practically is no more working over there, but yes, on paper they are still a socialist economy. Children, for your knowledge and information, I would like to add here that what socialist economy is. Socialist economy is an economy where all the economic decisions, like what to produce, how to produce, and for whom to produce, are taken by the government. And there is complete intervention of the government in this kind of economy. Therefore, it is written over here that it was a command economy. I repeat, command economy here means the socialist economy. So, India and Pakistan opted for mixed economy, whereas China opted for socialist economy. Recently, there are few questions. One of them in the sample paper, which I found, were that what were the similarities in the development strategies of India and Pakistan. So remember, children, this is the first similarity in the development plans of India and Pakistan. And this is the second similarity in the plans of the economic growth of India and Pakistan. That means we both opted for 5-year plan and we both opted for mixed economy. Then comes the third similarity, that is the economic reforms. Economic reforms, which we studied in the third chapter, that is the LPG policy or liberalization, privatization, and globalization policy. So, all these three economies adopted the economic reforms, but there are differences in time, although the time difference is very slight. That is, China adopted the first, that is in the year 1978. Pakistan was the second country to become liberalized, that is 1988, and India in the year 1991. So India was the latest in implementation and adoption of economic reforms. Children, please do take care of this, that these 3 years can be the one markers. So keep them in mind. And the other thing, when you're explaining this particular answer, that means the common things in the development paths of India, China, and Pakistan, there as well you need to mention these dates. Now, coming to the next topic. I hope everything is clear about this particular question, including the one markers. Knowing about the economies individually is more important. And the most important portion is, of course, the development strategy of China. We know that among all these three countries, the most powerful and developed economy is, of course, China, as China is the second largest economy of the world after USA. So it's very important to know about how come or what processes help the country to become self-dependent. Here the notes is in brief, children, but I'm sure that you have been very much familiar to the topics you have studied in NCRT. Here the PPT is a gist of all that. As I just mentioned, that in the year 1949, China established People's Republic of China. I repeat, People's Republic of China. It was a one party rule. It's a one marker, a very, very important one marker. Remember that which of the three countries is a one party rule? That is China. That means in China, under communist government, they have only one party to rule. There is only one party to compete for the political elections. So all the critical sectors related to economy, enterprises, lands, agriculture, even the individual decisions like education, health, and all are taken up by the government. So the government decision is the final decision in China. Then they sorry for interruption, children. There was, I think, some net related issue, and therefore I got disconnected. So, with continuation, I would like to talk about the first point first so that you can get a reconnection to it. That the government of China, which is also communist government, was the only one responsible for all the kind of decision taken in China. The second is China started with a very unique scheme personally appreciated by me, which is known as Great Leap Forward. I repeat, which is known as Great Leap Forward. This Great Leap Forward, commonly known as GLF campaign, was also aiming at the industrial development or productive development at massive scale. So in the year 1958, the Chinese government announced to resolve the problem of unemployment and to utilize the skill available in the people along with the resources available in the country, that anyone having any skill and any idea related to productivity can start up with the industries. Even if they don't have the place, they can utilize their backyards. Even if they don't have the workforce, they can take the help of the family members, and with the least investments they can start the production, and the producers were taken care by the government. In fact, these producers were also free from the taxes. That means the people were engaged in production with the available resources, and then the management of marketing, sale, and were all the other things taken care by the government of China. GLF was definitely one of the very unique scheme. It was not only unique but also very much supporting, as it solved the problem related to unemployment. It also resolved the problems related to unutilization or non-utilization of the resources in the country. Then in the second scheme, here I would like to talk to you about Great Proletarian Cultural Revolution, GPCR. This GPCR is also one of the very, very popular or unique idea implemented in the year 1965 by the then president, Mr. Mao. Mao Se-sung was the person who had been very much aware that for the development of China, they need to educate the students and the professional of their country. So, under the scheme, the students and professionals from their country were sent to Russia. I repeat, as I had already mentioned in the last topic, that Russia was one of the friends of China. I repeat, Russia was one of the friends of China. They both had the communist economy and socialist economy. So Russia was always there to support the development of China. Therefore, the Chinese professional and students were sent to Russia to learn about the agriculture, scientific developments, technological development, and industrial growth, as well as their political beliefs were also highly derived and affected by Russian beliefs. Then comes is the commune system. The third major reform they did was in agricultural productive sector. We know this very well that Russia, along with China, India, they are all agrarian economy. So China could definitely not ignore the productivity in agriculture. They promoted commune system, as this word sounds, commune, which means community. So they asked the people to do group or collective farming. Collective farming was promoted in order to sort the problems related to resources, low productivity, and also insecurity, which was there among the people. Moreover, the land could not be claimed by an individual as they were the socialist economy. Then definitely the people started working on the land, which were commune system lands given to the people or the farmers by the Chinese government. Children, remember that all these reforms were done in the initial phase just after the independence in China. But the real changes or the real reforms which we can see today or which we can notice today with the growth in GDP and China becoming the second largest economy in the world all took place in their second phase of reforms, which started after the change in the government in 70s and 80s. So now I'd like to discuss about those changes which took place in the year 70s and 80s. So why am I describing this in detail? That if you are asked to discuss about the reforms or the policies just after independence, you need to talk about these first 4 points. But when you are asked about the reforms in China in the modern age or the reforms which affected the Chinese growth, you need to talk about these last 4 points first. So what are these 4 points which I'm going to talk to you about? These all reforms were associated with agricultural arena, foreign trade, investments, and many more things. I would go one by one. I'll first go with agriculture. I just now told you that there was assurance of commune system in their country. They had asked the people to do commune farming or community farming where they were all sole responsible for the entire productivity. That means the group was entirely responsible for the group. So what they did is that means that group never took an individual in responsibility to increase the productivity of agriculture. So agriculture was negatively affected by this commune system. Considering all the losses made in the commune system, the Chinese government brought a reform. And what they did this time is they asked the farmers to be free to grow their crops in their lands. That means the lands were assigned to the farmers. I repeat, please listen to me very carefully. The lands were assigned to the farmers. The farmers were allowed to grow the crops of their choices and sell the crops in the market to earn the profit. This time they encouraged individual farming other than the commune farming or community farming. But in return, the government asked for the taxes from the farmers. I repeat, the government asked for the taxes from the farmers in return because the lands belong to the government, of course. Now, the second reform they made were in industrial sector. I repeat, the second reforms were made in the industrial sector. This time, they involved or introduced dual pricing policy. That means the prices for all the producers, may it be from an industrial unit or from the agricultural unit, were decided in two ways. Now, how were they decided in two ways? They were decided that if the producers are to be sold to the government, they will have a fixed price which is fixed by the government, whereas they can sell their rest of the produce to the rest of the market, including the international market, at the prices they wish. Children, please try to understand what dual pricing means. Dual pricing means that the farmers and the industrial producers, that means all the producers in the economy were allowed to sell their produces or buy their produces from market or to market at two prices. The first is the fixed price by the government. So the fixed quantities at the fixed price was sold or purchased only to or from the government, whereas the rest of the quantities were free to be sold or purchased from or to the rest of the world. So this commonly was known as dual pricing. This definitely helped because the producers were huge in China, as population and the area in China is of course huge. So they could earn good profit, and these profits gave incentives to the producers in China to further increase the productivity in the country and add on to the existing GDP. The third very, very important reform which they did in this period was to become globalized. As I mentioned in the last slide, that China was the first economy to be liberalized and the globalized economy. So in the year 1978, they had declared themselves to be an open economy. They were no more the closed economy. They had allowed the investments. They had allowed the foreign trade. So foreign trade, foreign investments in all the form, foreign direct investment, foreign indirect investments were all allowed. This was done in the later phase reforms. And under this, they also introduced a very unique idea, which is known as special economic zones. I repeat, special economic zones, you are all very much aware of it. SEZ, we discussed in the last chapters of IED. What is SEZ and what benefits were given, that I have already told you, but even then, once just to revise, SEZ are those geographical regions which are declared by economical benefits with the help of the typical economic and the social laws, so that the investors get all the benefits to come in that particular place for the development of that particular location. So SEZs were declared in China to develop certain zones or regions of China which were actually very much backward. So these are the reforms, children. This is very, very important, a very, very important portion from this entire section or entire chapter, as the most asked question among Indian, Pakistan, and Chinese economies, of course, Chinese economy. And I would like to remind you that you may be asked about the first phase and the second phase. In the later phase, you need to talk about the sixth, seventh, and eighth point, whereas in the first phase, you need to talk about the first, second, and third and fourth point. If no specification there in the question, then you need to discuss about all these 8 points. Proceeding to the next part of this chapter, which is the reforms or the strategies in Pakistan. Children, you are very much aware of the Indian economy. And if you remember chapter 2, 3, where we discussed about the various reforms adopted in India, you would easily be able to relate with Pakistan's reforms. As the first thing which was done in Pakistan, that they started following mixed economy. That means they went together with the existence of public as well as private sector, unlike China. Secondly, they introduced many more things. One of them, which is first common with Indian economy, I would like to discuss that to become self-sufficient in agriculture, they also adopted Green Revolution. Green Revolution was not that intensive as in India. As in India, we talked about technical reforms, HYV seeds, fertilizers, the credit arrangements for the farmers, and many more things to become self-reliant in agricultural produces. Pakistan was already very much fortunate in agricultural productivity, and their population was also very small to provide the food security to them. So Pakistan did not do much, but just invested in the infrastructure. I repeat, they only invested in the infrastructure to bring growth in agricultural sector under their Green Revolution process. I repeat, listen to me very carefully. Pakistan did not do much. They only invested under infrastructure in selected areas to ensure food securities and increase food production in their country under Green Revolution. Now, third thing, if you remember, I talked to you about self-sufficiency in India, which is also known as import substitution. Now, the same kind of policy was implemented in China under strategic reforms. This is called as strategic reforms. Remember this word. So, under the strategic reforms, they had introduced tariff protection, like we did. We also introduced tariff protection. This tariff protection was there to protect the domestic producers and consumers. This protection was put on the goods which were imported from the abroad or from the rest of the world. There were two economic conditions behind. The first was Pakistan was not able to make huge payments for the imported goods from the rest of the world. And second, it did not want the domestic producers to struggle with the competition of the imported goods. Now, third thing, I had already mentioned in the last slides that the three economies gave dominance to the public sector. So Pakistan did the same. In 1970s, the capital good industries, along with the banking system in Pakistan, I add on to this point, along with the banking system in Pakistan, were nationalized. The motive behind them was definitely political, that we don't need to discuss here, but they had nationalized the Pakistani banking systems along with the capital and heavy industries in Pakistan in order to protect their production units and economic status. In the year 1988, there was structural reform. As I just mentioned, the initial part of structural reform was this, where they introduced the tariff protection. The second part was they had also realized that nationalization was a wrong decision. Realizing this, that nationalization was the wrong decision, they had denationalized everything, including the industries, banking system, and also had encouraged the private sectors. I repeat, they had also encouraged the private sector. They not only encouraged the private sector, they had also, this was the time when they had also allowed all the foreign companies to come in their country. In short, I can say that they had also been liberalized, privatized, because denationalization becomes privatization, and also globalization, as they had allowed the international economies to enter their economy. So these were the basic changes which were there in their economy. Other than these policies, Pakistan's economy had been fortunate enough. In fact, their GDP growth also till 3 decades had beaten Indian GDP growth. That means theirs was better, much better than ours. How could it be possible? There was a single reason behind, and that was Pakistan always received huge financial support from the Western nations. Along with this, they also received the remittances. You are very much aware of this term, remittances. Remittances are the transfer income which is received from the rest of the world. So Pakistan's economy had also received huge remittances from their immigrants to the Middle East countries. The Middle East countries, including all the Central Asian countries, along with the Gulf countries, have lot of immigrants from Pakistan who work there, and they send the money, earned money, to their family on the name of remittances. This actually is the biggest strength of Pakistan's economy. And this has helped Pakistan's economy's health to stimulate the growth. Many a times it's been recorded that this could only be possible. That means the growth in the GDP could only be possible with the receiving of lot of remittances which were added to the national income of Pakistan. So I hope you have understood that how Chinese and Pakistani economy work and what were the strategies they followed. Now proceeding to India, I don't have much to speak about India as we have already discussed in detail in chapter 1, 2, and 3 about the growth of India. But even then, in short, just for your revision, I would like to tell you that we also decided to become a mixed economy or mixed economic system where we planned about the 5 year plan. I had already discussed about the 5 year plan also. Then we implemented many schemes related to industries, import, agriculture, for example, Green Revolution, import substitution, IPR 1956, and also we later on privatized ourselves in the 1991 by reducing the dominance of the public sector in the country. So this slide talks about the various changes which we did after independence. And I have all in short talked to you about this in the previous chapters. Now we need to discuss about a very, very important question. This demographic indication is very, very important individual question, which is asked generally as 4 marker and sometimes can be the part of a 6 mark question also. So when you're talking about demographic indicator, children, let me tell you that there is a specific table given in NCERT. Please refer to it. Sometimes that table is given in the question paper for reference and you need to compare on the basis of that. If you get such question, you will be lucky enough. If you do not get that table for your support or reference, then you need to write each and every point with the data. Remember, if you miss the data, you will definitely lose your marks also. So you need to add on certain important data as well. So I need to start with the demographic indicator comparison of all these 3 countries. The first I start with the Pakistan. Sorry, with population. So we know that officially China is still the largest populated economy in the world, whereas India is the second largest. But Pakistan's population is very low. Roughly, it is about the 1/10 only. It is 1/10 of the Indian and Chinese population. This data is very much there in that table. Please give reference of that particular data when you're writing the answer. Secondly, China being the largest nation geographically, India is the second largest, and Pakistan becoming the lowest, the density of population is highest in India. I repeat, the density of population is highest in India, whereas it is second highest in China and the least in Pakistan. Then comes to the growth rate of population. The population growth rate is about the number of births in a country. So I must tell you that the growth rate of Pakistan in population is the highest, whereas it is second highest in India and the third in China. If we talk about sex ratio or gender ratio, you can also see that the ratio of gender is lowest in India, second lowest is in Pakistan, and the best is in China. It is all because of the disparity and the gender inequality or the mindsets of these 3 economies which share common cultural backgrounds. The fertility rate of China and Pakistan are very high. In fact, Pakistan has the highest, whereas China had the second position and India in the third. Coming to urbanization. Here, urbanization of China and Pakistan both are very high, whereas India is beaten by them because India has only 28% of its people living in the urban areas, whereas China and Pakistan has the highest in the proportion of urbanization. So when you are talking about this demographic indicators, you need to talk about all these things. That means the data I just discussed to you. I would also like to show you the table I was just talking to you about. Just give me a second. I hope the table is visible to you, the screen is visible to you, children. Here we can see about the demographic status of the economies. It's there in the screen. I would like to enlarge it so that you can see. I just wanted to show this to you so that you can refer to this table when preparing for your exam. So this is their table number 10.5. There are many more tables which you need to refer to when you're preparing for the further. I'll just tell you as I tell you the topics with the PPT, I'll also be referring to these tables. See, this is table number 10.1, which we were just talking about, that is about estimated population, annual growth, density, sex ratio, fertility rate, and urbanization. This is the latest data because the downloaded PDF I have is the latest PDF, which indicates the data about 2017 and 18. Hopefully, you would take it in reference and prepare for your exams to write the answer. Now, I would like to go ahead with the previous slide, that is the PPT which we were talking about. This chapter is very, very important. I keep repeating that the weightage is also very high. Therefore, you need to take the utmost care when you're preparing for this chapter. Now, coming to the next topic, that is gross domestic product or GDP of the three countries. It's a very crucial topic. It can have many, many more datas which cannot be incorrect when you're writing. And it should also be prepared from the point of view of one markers because there are many one markers asked out of it. So presently, China has the second largest GDP of the world. I repeat, China has second largest GDP of the world. There's so many magics about Chinese economy, which they have done is within 2 decades, China was the first economy to reach the GDP growth of 2 digits. They had maintained the growth rate of 10 to 11% per years, which was definitely a challenge to the world. The rate of growth, the pace, and the maintenance of their GDP growth rate for almost 2 digits for years was really a miracle for the Chinese economy. So here you can see that in the year 2013, the GDP or PPP of China was 10.1 trillion, whereas for India and Pakistan, they were 4.2 trillion and 0.47 trillion only. Keep them in mind. They are very important one markers as well. I repeat, I would like to highlight this for you. The first you can see that for China, it is 10.1 trillion, whereas for Pakistan and India, for India, it is 4.2 trillion, whereas for China, it is only 0.47 US dollar. Then comes the average growth rate. As I just told you that the average growth rate for China maintained for years in 2 digits. They maintained it in between 10 to 13%. Whereas in recent year, they have made many losses into it and it has come down and it's been maintained to 9.5%, which is not less. Whereas India has maintained the GDP growth rate of only 5.8% and Pakistan has maintained it only for 4.1%. Moreover, 37% of the workforce in China is engaged in agriculture, which contributes to GDP of 9% only. But if you talk about India and Pakistan, this number is entirely different because they contribute highly in agriculture, that is 19% and 21% respectively by India and Pakistan. And you would be shocked to see this number that still more than 50% of India's population is dependent on agriculture. And China and Pakistan as well, the number is very high. Then coming to the highest contributor of GDP in the economies, of course, if you talk about the highest contributor in China, which is manufacturing industry, whereas in India and Pakistan, it is service sector. Children, there are a few questions asked out of this slide. Please have a record of it. Sometimes it is asked that why is there a remarkable growth of service sector in Indian economy? I repeat, why has there been a remarkable growth of service sector in Indian economy, and why have there been more contribution of GDP out of service sector in Indian economy? So there are certain reasons which I had discussed in the previous sessions. You can refer to the videos. Even then, in short, I would like to tell you, because of our educational policy, government policies, globalization, outsourcing, living standard, technical reforms, and the uses of foreign languages along with IT sector have all been the reason for the rise or growth in the service sector for the most. Here I would like to show you the table afterwards for the same topic, because this topic still continues. Now, if you talk about, as I just told you, that in China there has been decline in the GDP rate in last few years. What have been the reasons behind this decline? The first reason in decline of China's GDP is, of course, its own national and political reasons. National political decisions have affected the people and have also affected the foreign investors. Secondly, the feeling of nationalization has also been compromised in China because of their communist government. And third, and the most important thing, that they have never thought of sustainability in their development. I repeat, children, they have never thought of sustainability in their development. Although it has always followed the traditional pattern which every other country did, like shifting from agriculture to manufacturing industry, then to service sector. When it comes to Pakistan and Indian economy, it is entirely different. Pakistan shift has been directly from agriculture to service sector. And the same goes with India. If you observe your economic history very minutely, you will also find that we have also shifted from agriculture to service sector. In fact, we have jumped from agricultural sector to service sector. There's been gap for India and Pakistan both, because we have missed the industrial sector. Why have we missed? Because still most of our population is dependent either on agriculture or on service sector. That I'll show you through box in the next presentation. There is a saying among the experts and economists that if you want to grow an economy, you need to majorly focus on industrial or manufacturing sector. That actually proves very much by the growth of China's economy, because the Chinese economy growth was mainly contributed by the manufacturing sector. The manufacturing sector, which is not playing that major role in the economies of India and Pakistan. Coming to the human development indicators, this better would be that if I share it with the table of the textbook. The Here is the GDP, as I was just talking to you about, the growth rate of GDP in India, China, and Pakistan, a comparative analysis for the decade 1890 and 1570. So you can see that initially the India's GDP growth rate was the lowest, whereas China the highest, and Pakistan was the second highest. Whereas if you see in the decades 1570, year 2015 and 17, India's growth rate has been the highest, whereas China is the second and Pakistan is the lowest, which we have already the reason, and all the other data we have already discussed with the help of the previous presentation. Now I would like to show you the sectoral share of employment. This can be a question, children. Remember that it is an independent question, that what is the sectoral share of employment in GVA by all these three economies. So if you see, you will definitely observe that in Pakistan and India both, agricultural sector shelters maximum population, whereas if you see, China has diverted its population from agriculture to industrial and service sector. Now proceeding to the next table presentation, which is actually I opened this presentation for this basic reason, This is a very, very important table, which is table number 10.5 about the human development indicators. First of all, the HDI. This is a one marker also. Human index value. I'm just talking about value, not the rank. Human development value of index is 0.645 for India, 0.761 for China, and 0.557 for Pakistan. This one is more important, that is the HDI rank. India's HDI rank is 130, whereas for China it is 187 and Pakistan 154. You can see that China is much ahead of India. Life expectancy in India it is just 69 years, whereas in China it is much higher, which is 76. And Pakistan it is 67 years. Mean year of schooling and all the other things you must observe, but now I'll move to the very important thing, that is infant mortality rate. Infant mortality rate, here you can see, I'm facing problem in moving my cursor. Infant mortality rate, here you can see that is 29.9 in India, whereas it is only 1.7. Although you must be thinking that how can it be a fractional number when it is infant mortality rate? But yes, it is as per the statistical analysis. And you can see 7.4 there in China, and Pakistan it is 57.5. Now, yes, ma'am, I just got disconnected. I want to resume the session. Only last topic is left. I'll take 5 more minutes.
Sure, sure, no worries.
Okay. Okay. So, children, talking about the human development index which we were just discussing presently with the presentation with you with the help of the PDF I had in NCERT. I would like to remind you of that we have certain strategic improvements. We had so many improvements in IMR, in population density, in life expectancy, in HDI rank, and many more things, where you could realize that in all these basic things, India was ahead of Pakistan, whereas China was leading both the economies. Now, I would like to tell you the next and the last topic for the chapter, that is conclusion. I would like to conclude this about all the three economies. That is, if you talk about Indian reforms, we know this very well, that the majority of people in India still depend on agriculture. We still have a lot of lack in agricultural and infrastructural parts. We still have to improve the GDP of the economy, and we need to employ the people in the country. We also have to raise the standard of living with many basic best facilities to be provided to the people in the economy. We also need to remember that there are so many other things which are causing a setback in China and Pakistan's economies. We'll one by one discuss them as well. That is, here I talk to you about the Pakistan's economy. See, Pakistan's economy has seen many ups and downs. If you talk about the present scenario, they have definitely been suffering from multiple economic challenges, and all these are basically because of the political instability. It's also been affected in last 2 years due to COVID, but the re-emergence of poverty in their country has been affected because of the lack of remittances and lack of the foreign investors in their economy. Then coming to the Chinese economy, that is, if you talk about the economy of China, they will find that definitely they have been the best. They have tried to elevate their poverty. They've also been able to provide employment to their people. They've also been one of the largest exporter to the world. They are in top 10. They are the second largest economy, but still they have not been able to retain their GDP development to that 2 digit which they started with. This has definitely come down because the growth rate of GDP is now the highest in India. So how could it be possible? It was all possible with their good strategies and the hard work done with by the government with honest strategies but also there are so many setbacks which is keep pulling it down, which we discussed in the last slide. Thank you so much. I hope these sessions were helpful for you for IED. Tomorrow onwards, we are going to start with macro, and first I'll focus on national income and its accounting. So for tomorrow, the session is based on macroeconomics first unit, that is national income and accounting. Thank you so much. Now I would like to take your leave.